These are the things you're doing that are slowing you down. And today, I'm joined by Josh Poertner, founder of Silca, but also just an expert in all things bike tech, lubrication, resistance reducing, everything basically. And also you worked at Zip for 14 years, technical director.
Yeah, long time.
Yeah, the man behind a lot of those iconic wheels we know today. So I want to pick your brains then on the things you see triathletes doing that are slowing them down.
Wow, okay.
The list is probably quite long.
It's a list. I always pick on triathletes for bike cleanliness. That's number one. You know, I've probably worked 20 Konas and 100 plus Ironman. You guys are busy. I get it, right? You've got 3 sports to train for. I mean, there's just a lot of stuff going on.
You're being very kind.
But the bikes, I mean, sometimes are atrocious.
And even from the pros.
Even at the, yeah. And, how many times I've been at Ironman level event and you hear the creak, creak, creak of somebody riding by and you want to run after them. Just anything, anything is better than that.
Yeah.
But bike cleanliness is a huge one. A clean bike absolutely, truthfully, is a faster bike. And, obviously we sell chain lubricants and could talk your ear off about that topic. But I mean, even just cleaning your drivetrain and putting a lubricant on it can be, 6 to 12 watts faster than a dirty bike with old, dirty lubricant on it. Things like scrubbing, especially if you're using like oil-based lubricants, the oil gets like the road grit and dirt and sand stuck in it, and then that's on your cassette teeth and your chainring teeth, and so now the rollers of the chain struggle to roll on because there's you think, the diameter of a chain roller, right? A little piece of sand is like, it's like a stick in front of your roller skate wheel, right? Yeah. It's like, it does not want to roll. And so, I mean, just giving it a good kind of a once-over scrub and put, definitely there's some lubes, but don't use dry lubes. I would say that's my one. Dry lubes tend to just be terrible non-lubes, but high-quality lubricant on there. I mean, truly 6 to 12 watts just from cleaning and fresh lube.
Okay.
So that's huge.
You heard it here. All right. Anything else then?
Tires are the other one I see a lot of. Back, when we were building Zip, right? They were race wheels, and we trained on box section wheels, and we raced on our carbon wheels, and a lot of that was because they were tubulars, and it's just a different world. And I think the game has really changed. Your wheels are your wheels. You're training on probably what you're racing on. And so I would say the couple of things I see there are, people have training tires on their good carbon wheels and they show up to race on them, and either they're flat spotted, they're a little bit threadbare, there's nicks and cuts, things that are risky. But also, a training tire is pretty darn slow compared to a good race tire. So, I mean, you can easily be giving up, particularly if you're running like butyl inner tubes or something still, I mean, you could be giving up 20 watts per tire of efficiency with a training tire in a butyl inner tube versus like a top tubeless or lightweight clincher with a latex tube. Yeah. But you can also be, all those little nicks and cuts in that tire, those are just risks that you're taking for the duration of your
Personally,
event.
I was always meticulous in changing my tires before a race because I'm like, I've come all this way, spending all that money and done all this training, and like if I'm going to spend 10 minutes on the side of the road trying to fix something, it would infuriate me. So yeah, I'm pleased you said that. How about then with tires, the importance of the width of the tire, pressure?
Huge. Yeah, so I mean, you want to find, there's resources out there like bicyclerollingresistance.com is a great website with a lot of testing. You want to find the fastest tire that has enough puncture resistance that you can be comfortable with. There's always that roll of the dice. But how much risk you're comfortable taking. But get the fastest tire you're comfortable with. You really ideally want it to be equal to or smaller than the width of that rim.
Yeah, so how do you, because this is an interesting one, and we could probably do a whole separate video about this, but matching a tire with the rim, because brands will sometimes tell you which tires match their profile, the rim, right?
Yeah, there's certainly, Zip, I think, does a pretty good job. Envy does a pretty good job of telling you, these brands, these widths tend to be fast. It's hard now with the different internal bead width of the rims. A 28 can be 30 or 27, depending on what rim you're putting it on. And so that's one to kind of think through and be careful of. Again, bicyclerollingresistance.com, he's got widths of the tire on different bead widths, and so you can use that at least directionally. He might not have exactly what you've got, but if he's got something close, you can probably kind of interpolate what that width is going to be. But I would say from experience, typically, and I would probably call out Zip first there, like they're typically telling you probably one size bigger than is actually the fastest size. We definitely went through a period a few years ago where everybody was like, well, wider tires have less rolling resistance. And that's not exactly true when you get them all optimized to the right pressure. Right. Or the differences that are there can be small, and quite often they're related to when they make the preform of the tire. You think you've got these fabric plies and these rubber plies. And what a lot of the tire manufacturers do is like that tread piece of rubber is the same for the 25, the 28, the 30, maybe the 32. And the casing is just getting bigger. And so the bigger tires look faster because they actually have more casing and less tread.
Right.
And then some companies don't work that way. Continental is probably a good example. They have a preform per size. And so like if you test the Continentals of the different sizes and you test them at their optimal pressure, they're all basically the same. Okay. And so there's no real rolling resistance advantage to going bigger. And so in that case, I would optimize almost entirely towards aerodynamics. Which typically is going to be at least on the front tire. So
we did see a lot of people sort of flipping towards 28s, but I'm actually seeing more latterly quite a few of the pros going 25 front, 28 rear. Which seems quite common, but obviously dependent on the wheel as well, and what they're trying to get. Pressure then, because I will put my hand up here and say I've fallen foul of, racing on 23s back in the day, and then I've just kind of like hung on to this like 100 psi, and so sort of dropping down to something as low as 70 or even sometimes even lower. I'm like, what? Do you think it's quite common? Quite a big thing?
Totally. It's totally. I mean, we've joked for years. We have a tent. We call it the inflation station. We go to these events. We take our pump products and some of our other things. And I swear to God, probably 9 out of 10 tires we're actually letting pressure out of. So it's like we have all these beautiful pumps and we never use them because you're like, you have a little too much, And so it's a lot more bleeding than inflating.
What I would say then, and it's helped me out a lot latterly because I've, as I say, been making big mistakes. James actually called me out a couple of times. Use the Silca.com website because you've got a brilliant tire pressure calculator on there. It makes it so simple. You can plug everything in, done.
Our calculator is the only one I know of in the world. It's based on actual data. So actual Chung methodology, like field testing data. I think there's over 6,000 data points in it at the moment. I mean, we've worked with Jan Frodeno and Gwen, and so many people over all these years, all these World Tour teams. But it can get you close. And, typically I would say because the data set the calculator is based on is mostly World Tour athletes who tend to be certainly thinner than me and lower body fat. So if anything, our calculator is probably at the higher end for most people because as you gain body mass and particularly higher body fat percentage, that transition to what we call the impedance curve happens at a lower pressure. And so, start with that and then, try a couple PSI lower and see what maybe do your own Chung testing. But I would say the kind of the mental picture we try to give people is like feel for smooth. I think you and I probably grow up, you felt that vibration and like that felt fast. And it's not. And so what you really want to feel for is not necessarily plush, but smooth.
Got you. All right, cool. Anything else then you'd like to...
Position I think is probably the next big one. I think there's a lot of, we've talked about kind of copying what the pros are doing amongst the age groupers. But I think, I still feel like you see a lot of these positions that people have that are, just too high, kind of, you're obviously balancing the comfort piece, which is a challenge, and the need to actually get off and run. It's not like road cycling where you can get off the bike and crawl.
It's an interesting topic, actually, because I, in the past, used to see, people put an aero bars on and their position doesn't change other than their elbows coming in. I'm like, why are they even bothering doing that for? But I've actually kind of started to maybe respect it to a degree because they are potentially still reducing their CDA.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
And actually, sometimes, over 180K, that does feel a little bit more comfortable than that.
Yeah.
So they are doing something,
Yeah.
right? But there's still so much more that can be done. And I don't think people realise how upright they are half the time, right?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of miss the old slow twitch forum days where people would, rate my position. And I think everybody was, your saddle's too high and you need to be lower. The modern bikes, I mean, really we can, it was what Richard Bryan from Speedplay was, I think, the first to really come up with this sort of steep bike geometry in the 80s, and the idea that, we can take your position here and just rotate you around your feet forward and down. And I think if you do it right, and this is why it's important to have a good fitter, but if you do it right, I mean, really all you're doing is increasing the weight on your elbows. But you're not really changing that body position. And so, you can keep your hip angles the same, your breathing stays the same. I mean, if you do it right, you can really have exactly the same position, just rotated forward, but the drag savings can be huge. I think back to Jordan Rapp was an athlete I loved working with, and, my God, Jordan was, winning the, Ironman events at the professional level on, 300 watts, right? And it was kind of cool at the time because a lot of the other pros just couldn't figure it out. How's he doing it?
Yeah.
And, it was a lot of work in the wind tunnel and with the marginal gains and those things. But, being able to hold those speeds at 20, 40 watts less than your competition is just massive, right? And then you get off and you have so much more in the tank for the run.
Yeah.
Which I think, as much as I love to talk about cycling, I think really for a lot of athletes that's the bigger one, where you come up and go, yeah, my bike was good, but man, I took, 8 minutes off the run. You're like, that's the key. That's why we're doing the rest of this stuff.
Brilliant. Okay. Anything else?
Clothing would probably be and clothing and helmets. So wrinkles, I know Ollie has had his skin suit custom tailored. All the pro teams we work with, we have tailors, and we will tailor and kind of nip and tuck on the suits. I always talk about it as being about a watt per wrinkle. And so, if your kit isn't perfectly fitting, and you've got some wrinkles in it, I mean, that's just free speed that you're giving away. So you can, I mean, quite frankly, you can sew it yourself. You can typically kind of mark it, pull it, or have your spouse or significant other, kind of pull on it in some places, kind of put some marks on it, and literally you can just fold them in and just run them through a sewing machine. It can be watts and watts of savings.
I guess this is the hard thing with a tri-suit that you've got to swim in. Because I know a lot of cycling brands have tried to develop suits that, will work and be fast on the bike, but then I've worn them and they're barely able to get your arms up on the swim. But definitely there is
I'm a big believer. I think certainly at Ironman distance, in the short stuff, it really gets hard. But certainly at the Ironman distance, you are better to take 5 or 10 extra seconds and change, particularly whatever top you're wearing, to something that really works. Or, I think we've seen anymore a lot of, maybe you've got the skin suit kind of rolled in, and then you've got something, your wetsuit or whatever over, and then take the time to kind of get that on, and you can literally save yourself, that 10 seconds can save 3-4 minutes. So net positive. Yeah.
All right. I'm going to throw one more very quick last one in then. As triathletes, the thing infuriates me, I see it all the time. Everyone optimizes their bike. They've got this really lovely looking bike, and they turn up on race day and they suddenly just laden it with gels and spares. And they are doing all that hard work, all that beautiful bike. Yeah. I mean, you've probably seen this time and time again.
Oh, we've tested it. There was a great image, it's probably 15 years now. It was a Scott, and it had from the stem all the way to the seat post gels. I mean, there must have been 30 of them. And then there was a Snickers bar or something, electrical tape to the... and so we actually went to the wind tunnel and we're like, we've got to test this, if for nothing else, the photo op. And it's a pretty big detriment. I mean, you think of they're not arrow-shaped things. They're flappy and flat, and they're generally, if you're sticking them on, they're kind of in the wind. I think that's one of the most exciting things with some of these modern bikes that have these, storage areas and things. I think if you're clever, you can get almost all of that stuff out of the wind. But it can undo, truly probably 15-20% of the Aero savings that you've paid for. You are undoing.
I mean, like obviously some people won't have the option. They are on a bike that hasn't got all this integrated storage, and I also used to do the same on bikes. Similar, it used to infuriate me putting this stuff on there, trying to figure out where I should put it. But there are some options out there. There's brands that are making some, particularly with 3D printing now. There's lots of little add-on extras that you can get, pop them on, and definitely think they're worth that investment.
I think storage between the arms is generally pretty safe. I mean, it sometimes can be beneficial, sometimes it's not. Rarely is it a detriment to people. There's like the behind the seat bottles, like that's one like a little too high, a little too low. You can actually be hurting yourself with some of those products. But the between the arms stuff is generally, I would say, pretty safe. Like some athletes we've seen, significant savings from, and then maybe the next one you're like, well, it's a wash, but at least it's not hurting you. So I'd say that's a pretty safe one.
All right. Well, there we go. If you're doing any of those things, now you know what you should be doing. Do it better next time. Right. Well, thanks very much, Josh. Cheers for joining us today. And hope you guys enjoyed it. Give it a thumbs up if so. See you next time.